Science calls it REM atonia, a chemical glitch where your mind wakes up, but your body stays completely paralyzed. They say the terror is just a hallucination. But if it's only a trick of the brain, why do millions of people across the globe see the exact same thing standing at their bedside, a cold, silent figure known only as the Hat Man? For years, I clung to the comfort of the medical diagnosis, until the night I woke up from the paralysis and found the dream had left two things behind: purple, finger-shaped bruises on my shoulder, and my front door, which I always lock, standing completely ajar. They tell you it's just a glitch. A chemical misfire called REM atonia. Your mind wakes up, but your body stays asleep, trapping you in a corpse-like state. Your panic centers, desperate to explain why you can't move, hallucinate a threat. That's the scientific explanation. It's clean, it's clinical, and it's comforting. That's what I told myself the first 10 times it happened. I spent hours reading neurobiology papers, trying to force my terror into a neat, medically defined box. I needed it to be a mistake in my brain chemistry, because the alternative, that something real was using my sleep state to cross over, was intolerable. But science doesn't explain why we all see the same thing. It doesn't explain the shared geography of our nightmares. If the mind is inventing a monster, why the universal uniform? If it were truly random, my mind should be conjuring childhood bullies, or a snarling beast, or an oncoming train. Instead, it was always the same shape, the same absolute lack of features, the same oppressive cold. It felt less like a hallucination and more like a targeted, persistent broadcast, aimed at my specific neural frequency. It started for me in college, during finals week in a drafty dorm that smelled of old dust and floor wax. Stress is a trigger, they say, a crack in the door. I remember waking up, or thinking I woke up, to the sound of static. Not the gentle white noise of a TV left on, but a heavy, wet static that tasted like copper pennies and felt like it was buzzing inside the marrow of my teeth. It was a pressure, like my skull was filling with fine iron filings, and every nerve ending was exposed. I tried to roll over to check my phone, to ground myself in reality, but my body was dead weight. It wasn't just that I couldn't move, it felt like gravity had increased tenfold, pinning me to the mattress. My limbs felt like lead, disconnected from my will, and my breath was trapped, shallow, barely stirring the air in my lungs. My chest only rose and fell with the minimum mechanical requirement for survival. Then came the sense of presence. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and know, instinctively, that someone is staring at the back of your head? Imagine that amplified by 1,000, focused directly on your throat. It was a pressure in the air, a thickening of the atmosphere that made the room feel suddenly claustrophobic. The very air around me felt electrically charged, thick with menace, as if the humidity had turned to solid fear. The hairs on my skin felt brittle and cold. I strained my eyes, the only part of me that seemed to work, scanning the dark room. My dorm room was small, filled with innocent shadows cast by the streetlights outside, the shape of a chair, a pile of laundry. But there, in the corner by the wardrobe, the shadows were darker, denser. They didn't obey the light coming from the window, they seemed to consume it, creating a perfect absence of illumination. A silhouette detached itself from the gloom, stepping out of the fabric of the dark. It was tall, too tall for the ceiling, and two-dimensional, like a void cut out of the room itself. It wore the silhouette of a wide-brimmed fedora and trench coat, not as clothing, but as part of its skin, a seamless garment of pure shadow. The Hat Man. I'd read the threads online, seen the fan art, laughed at the memes about Benadryl demons. But seeing him standing 3 feet from my bed wasn't funny. It was primal terror. It was the feeling of being prey. The creature was the perfect distillation of everything the human mind is wired to fear in the darkness: anonymous, silent, and overwhelmingly present. He didn't walk, he glided, a fluid motion that suggested he wasn't touching the floor, but was being pulled through the air like a piece of paper in a current, violating every physical law. There was no sound of footsteps, just that intensifying static buzzing in my ears, rising to a deafening shriek like a radio tuned between stations of hell. He stopped right beside my bed and leaned over. The paralysis intensified, locking my jaw shut. I tried to scream, to thrash, to beg, but my chest felt like it was encased in concrete. I could see no face, just a smooth, black void where features should be, an emptiness that felt like it was observing me with intense, malevolent curiosity, calculating its next move. He leaned closer, and I felt it. Cold. Not the chill of a draft or an open window, but a radiating, absolute zero that burned my skin, starting at my exposed arms and sinking into my bones. It was the cold of a deep cave, of something that had never seen the sun. He brought a long, shadowy finger to where his mouth should be, in a universal gesture, shoo. A demand for silence. A demand that I submit and absorb the terror without resistance. Then, I woke up. Gasping, sputtering, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, my sheets soaked through with sweat that had instantly turned icy. The room was empty, the shadows back to being just laundry and furniture. I did what everyone does. I Googled it. Shadow people sleep paralysis. I fell down a rabbit hole that lasted for weeks, sinking deeper into the lore. I found thousands of stories. I learned about the incubus in medieval Europe, the maras of Scandinavia, the piscidera of Brazil, the old hag of Newfoundland. Different names, different languages, different times, but the core events were identical: a weight on the chest, inability to move, and a sinister figure watching. And now, the modern iteration, the Hat Man, was being reported by people in Tokyo, in London, in Brazil. This wasn't local folklore, this was a global, recurring pattern, a template for fear transmitted through human consciousness itself. There were variations: sometimes he had glowing red eyes, sometimes he held a cane, but the core archetype was terrifyingly consistent. The scientific dismissal felt like a deliberate oversight, a refusal to see the pattern. The episodes got worse. They weren't just visual anymore. They became tactile. The boundaries were eroding. The glitch was learning. Sleep became the enemy. My life devolved into a state of chronic, agonizing vigilance. I started drinking 4-5 coffees a day, terrified to close my eyes. My life became a cycle of caffeine-induced mania and sleep-deprived anxiety, punctuated by frantic, useless rituals, sleeping with salt circles, keeping lights on, taping a cross to the headboard. But exhaustion always wins eventually. One night, I fought the urge to sleep until 4 a.m., finally collapsing face down in my pillow, the suffocating darkness pressing against my eyelids. The static returned almost instantly. I couldn't breathe. I felt a weight settle on the small of my back. Heavy. Distinct. It wasn't a general pressure, it was the specific, concentrated pressure of two knees pressing into my spine, pinning me down. The weight was crushing, forcing the last of the air from my lungs in ragged puffs. I felt hands, large, cold, solid hands, grip my shoulders, their fingers digging into my flesh like talons, securing me to the mattress. I tried to thrash, but my muscles merely twitched, pathetic, microscopic vibrations against the crushing force. A voice, sounding like dry leaves skittering on pavement, or sandpaper rubbed over a broken microphone, whispered directly into my ear. It didn't sound like it came from outside, it sounded like it was transmitted directly into my auditory nerve, bypassing my ear canal entirely, rattling the very bones of my skull. You're almost ready. The door is thin. We thank you for your compliance. The additional phrase twisted the terror into something far worse than fear of the dark: anticipation. Compliance. Ready for what? For possession. For the entity to fully cross over. The feeling wasn't just physical restraint, it was psychic violation. I fought. I poured every ounce of willpower into wiggling a toe, a finger, anything to break the paralysis. I focused on a single joint, trying to tear myself free, praying for a seizure, a spasm, anything to tear the link. It felt like trying to lift a car with my mind. I screamed internally, a silent roar of panic and self-preservation that echoed in the empty void of my trapped consciousness. Finally, with a guttural gasp that tore my throat, I broke free, thrashing and falling out of bed onto the hard floor, scrambling away from the mattress, feeling the phantom pressure lift like a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure. I tore the apartment apart. Every light blazing. Closets thrown open. Shower curtain ripped back. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator and my own jagged breathing, which sounded obscenely loud in the stillness. I checked my pulse, impossibly fast. But then I went to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face, trying to wash away the phantom sensation of those cold hands. I looked in the mirror, gripping the porcelain sink to steady my shaking hands. I froze. There, on my left shoulder, rapidly fading but unmistakably real, were 3 finger-shaped bruises. Deep purple marks, like old wine stains, in a pattern no human hand could comfortably make on themselves while thrashing in sleep. They were cold to the touch. The medical explanation instantly crumbled. I wasn't hallucinating, I was being held by something outside the parameters of my own anatomy. I wasn't suffering a glitch, I was being visited, and the visitor left receipts.